You are listening to a Resource Sharing Project podcast on organizational strategies for enhancing sexual assault services in rural, dual, or multi-service advocacy agencies. This podcast was developed with support from the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. Looking at our organizational capacity for sexual assault services is critical because our organizational habits and policies are more powerful than we sometimes realize. Each conversation an advocate has with a survivor happens within the context and culture set by the organization. The Resource Sharing Project has identified 10 components of strong dual or multi-service advocacy agencies, including mission, advocacy, ongoing support services, systems, unity, oppression, culturally relevant, vicarious trauma. Let's take a look at how strong dual advocacy agencies provide services to the full continuum of sexual violence survivors, including girls and boys, teen and adult women, and teen and adult men. We know that sexual assault services cannot happen unless advocates feel knowledgeable and comfortable providing sexual assault services. To serve sexual violence survivors fully, advocates must understand how multiple systems, including criminal justice, social services, and healthcare, operate in regards to sexual violence. They must also possess knowledge to increase medical, criminal, legal, civil legal, and healing options for sexual violence survivors. These are often different from the needs of and options for domestic violence survivors. So we must give advocates training specific to sexual violence. Both domestic violence and sexual violence advocates need training on general skills like active listening, empathy, building trust, empowerment, and supporting survivors' choices. For sexual assault advocacy work, we must also share knowledge on the different types of sexual violence, healing after sexual violence, emergency advocacy for sexual violence survivors, long-term advocacy for sexual violence survivors, and the services available in our communities. With knowledge on these topics, advocates can be ready, willing, and able to serve all sexual violence survivors in the community. We need to look carefully at the interventions we offer to survivors. The services we provide and how we provide them influences survivors' decisions to seek services and staff response to survivors. Sexual assault victim advocacy should encompass immediate and long-term work with survivors on healthcare, justice, safety, housing, employment, school, and other needs that arise. Providing services particularly designed for sexual violence survivors opens our doors to more survivors. An agency could, for example, offer support groups specific to sexual violence survivors rather than integrating them into domestic violence groups. We know that support groups provide validation and connection. We also know that being with people that experience similar kinds of violence is one of the most effective ways to provide that validation. Support groups are also an avenue for reaching a wider range of survivors. For example, an agency could offer support groups that are age or gender specific. Agencies can also look at adding holistic healing opportunities, such as creative art groups, movement and exercise groups, and meditation groups. We must also have services that meet the unique needs of survivors of sexual violence that are coping with complex issues. For example, partnering with local substance abuse agencies is a great way to expand your sexual violence services and reach more survivors and a broader range of survivors. Some adult survivors of child sexual abuse, for instance, may seek help for substance abuse but have never talked about this sexual abuse. By working with substance abuse service providers, we can reach these vulnerable survivors. There are so many ways to grow our sexual assault services through training, community partnerships, or programming. We hope this podcast has sparked some ideas about how you might deepen your sexual violence advocacy work. For more information about deepening our roots, a training and technical assistance project for OVW rural grantees, visit www.resourcesharingproject.org/rural-sexual-assault-services. There you can also find the companion publication for this podcast, e-learning tools, and other publications and resources to help you develop your rural sexual assault services. This project was supported by grant number 2008-TA-AX-K043, awarded by the Office on Violence Against Women, U.S. Department of Justice. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this publication, program, exhibition, are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women.